Hey there, my name is Valhallen and welcome to How to Build. Today we'll be going over interiors, and honestly, I've already done this building's interior, and that's partially so you guys don't have to see about 20 minutes of me fiddling around with the inside, and I can just go ahead and already explain what it is that you should and probably need to do. Let's go ahead and get started. So, for context, I've divided this house up into two different sections: decorational and functional. If you can already tell the startling difference between the two, that somehow managed to look similar enough in style to not really see the difference. Now, decorational, let's do that one first. So for decorational builds, you're going to want to take into account things that you probably have or just see in everyday life. This, for example, whenever you walk in, is the kitchen. So kitchens aren't needed in Minecraft, so it could be considered decorational. At least that's what I say. Now, be it there are some functional aspects to this. The smoker you can actually use. There's actually cabinets up here that you can access and store things in if you feel like it. But at the end of the day, it's just a pretty thing to look at, you know? There's no real use behind it. It's a bit inconvenient in cabinet space, and really there's no point in having this little table with candles right here. But it's pretty, and that's all right. Now, decorational builds are, well, interiors actually, are just mainly meant to fill space. So if you see an area that looks particularly empty, you should try and fill it up and see what you think would look best for at least the layout of the build, which we've already gone over in a previous video. Speaking of which, this is actually the house that I built in that video. But anywho, back onto the subject. For example, this area over here, this little corner, I felt looked a bit empty and plain. So I added a little armor stand and a painting or two to help liven things up, and honestly, I think it looks just a little bit better. Carpets are also really useful whenever doing stuff like this, because it just makes it feel warmer, almost, I guess. It adds depth to the floor a little bit, and that's alright. Speaking of the floor, texture them. I know it kind of seems pointless, but I recommend to texture your floors. Texturing we'll be going over in a different video, but that's also a completely separate subject. However, if you don't know what you want your floors to look like, I recommend sticking with a wood. Do a particular wood type and mess around with how the floor looks. You wouldn't know it, but originally I was just going to do a completely plain dark oak planks. So it would have just been nothing but dark oak planks and maybe a little bit of these. And honestly, that is a bit terrible. That sounds a bit terrible whenever you're doing the floor design. So instead, I found the block that I really wanted to use, example, dark oak, because of the dark oak on the outside, and I found any blocks that looked similar enough to it in color and relative texture, and I found this. And this was the best outcome besides dark oak planks. And that is what makes it look relatively nice, almost unnoticeable that it just kind of has that slight hint of texture to it. The roof, however, you should want to smooth out about as much as possible. Add stairs to the underside of it so that way it feels like it's more enclosed in and more secure, and even support beams if you think it should feel even more supported or just in general look even the tiniest bit more realistic. Adding greenery also improves the area and makes it seem more alive even. So yeah. Onto the functional side of things, however, you still want to make it look pretty if you're trying, and I recommend having shelves, for example, in storage spaces. Storage spaces, of course, can have pretty much anything you want in them. Like I put here a brewing stand, and it honestly kind of makes sense. Mainly because whenever you're doing storage spaces, shelves are just an immediate go-to. So we have this little hanging shelf right here, and all of these little organized ones. in this little wall of chests. And whenever you do a wall of chests, you should actually make sure to break up your chests so that way it doesn't seem like just a complete pattern. And that way you have little gaps and little differences and details in there that can be seen sometimes. Barrels, whenever you add them, should always have trapdoors to the outside of them to give it more shape. And banners can actually be implemented in both decorational and functional. They look like curtains from the outside and the inside, so I recommend adding those. Onto this little area back here, this is also functional, but it does have its little decorational purposes. There's an ender chest up here for personal stuff and a plant right next to it, because if we were to add a chest right next to this ender chest, this shelf would seem like it had too much weight on it, at least in my opinion. Over here, we have a crafting table and a chest because this looks like it can support a full chest's worth. Beds, I recommend adding a sign to the side of them, so that way it just kind of seems more enclosed. Oh, my bad. Seems more enclosed, or just seems like it has something up against it. Anywho, that should be the rest of the interior, but the only thing I can recommend adding if you for sure don't know what else I could say, is to just make sure those empty little areas, the places that look like they need just something else added to them, if all else fails and you have no idea what to put there, I say put a painting, because they instantly make the area feel like they have just that little bit more something to them. You know? Hi, editing Valhalla here. I just realized I never really quite said something in the video after going over the footage, and a really good tip to have in mind whenever you're doing the interiors is to fit the interior to the inside of the build. So what you can get somewhere is what you need to have there. If you think you can fit a fireplace in a spot, then try and fit a fireplace and see what happens. Alright. Anyway, I sure hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to subscribe for more content, or check out my Twitch for more, building stuff, I guess, you know? Alright, see ya. Goodbye!